Hey guys, how's it going? Ghostly Rich here today, and today we are going to be changing out the brake pads and rotors on this FJ 2007. So, biggest thing is if you still have the security locks, go ahead and do that. You want to loosen these while they're on the ground, just in case they're really tight, because you don't want them rotating when you're trying to do it. As you can see, I just get it so it spins once. The top ones, I'll usually just make sure they're not too loose. Or at least 3 of them. There we go. I know with this, I can get it off in the air, but for you, there. Now that I know I have all the bolts loose on this side, I'm only going to be doing and lifting one side at a time, so that way I've always got 3 wheels on the ground. That being said, we're doing the fronts, so feel free to put your parking brake on. When you do the rears, you have to release the parking brake. So something important to note is when we do the rears, for safety reasons, you will chuck the fronts with lumber. So for example, do your fronts first with the parking brake on. Afterwards, when you're done and you take the parking brake off, do this. If it attempts to roll back even a little bit, what'll end up happening is the wood will catch and the vehicle will not roll back. People always ask me, where do I jack it up? Well, there's your tire. There's my jack stand in front of the cross member there. And there is my jack. I'll probably move my jack. I slipped it out a little bit just so I could kind of show you where I grabbed on the frame there. So I'll loosen this off and put it back underneath. But the jack stand is under the frame. Never ever do it with just on a jack. For you, if it's just a little bit off the ground, go like that. See how I smacked it up top and it just put itself on the ground? Saves your back a little bit. Then you can go ahead and I'm just gonna lean it on my leg for a sec because it's still pretty heavy. But just roll it over, put it off to the side. Now let's show you how easy this is. Pin, we call these Jesus pins because, well, they try to make you say Jesus as you pull them out because they bounce around like that. Put that off to the side. After you do that, you'll notice you should be able to, it'll either twist or be a little bit mobile. We should be able to move this pin. I'll show you that in one sec. Next is to move this one. See how I pulled that out? There's another one on this side. Pull it out as well, work it from around and down inside. We should be able to now move this one around. Down here, again, we have another one of these clamps, or I should say cotter pins, that's what they are. But as you can see, this one's rotated. I'm gonna see if I can get it out here. This one is a little different than Brembos. See, with Brembos, especially the Nissan Brembos, they allow you to rotate. These ones, I guess you could grab them with a pair of pliers and try to rotate, but... So, soak this and leave it for 5 minutes after you've soaked it with brake clean. After you've done so, line sock it up like this and bang with a hammer. As you do, you'll see it start sliding. It'll start to slide like this. I was gonna do it, but it's gonna be really loud in your ears and show you absolutely nothing really. You just should be able to tap that with a hammer and you'll see this pin start moving. So right here, I don't know how much this is going to show, but all I've done literally is gotten a smaller screwdriver than the pin, slid it through here, and then I made sure it's a Robertson so it's the biggest tip, and you just line it up and keep love tapping and the pin will start to come out. Just make sure you're staying centered with it and lubricate the pin whenever possible so that way it continuously lubes up the spot in here so it should slowly come out easier. We're going to clean this up and let it soak in brake clean when it's out. Once you get to this point, you should almost be able to wiggle it out, or just put your hand in and just like that. And that's what you're trying to get, is to get that to just continuously slip that way. Again, time for this one. It's not the easiest, but it's their way of doing it. And again, it's a lot like Brembos. Brembos, a lot of the times they have 2 pins that go through. You pull out a cotter pin on either side because that's what keeps the brake sliding pin in. And then after that, you slide the pin out, pull these pads out, and you can actually use the pads to retract the pistons afterwards. And then you slide your new pads in and keep going. They're made for track days, so that way you can get these out in 5 minutes. The problem is with this design, especially for this, yes, it's still easy to switch your brake pads out, and it doesn't require for you to take the whole caliper off if you're just doing pads, but it makes it challenging if they sit for a while because then you get corrosion on the inside and then the pin's way harder to come out, especially since these are off-road vehicles. They're going to see mud and dirt and salt if you live up north or anywhere with snow. So if it sits long enough and it actually keeps decreasing, this is how easy it comes out. That's how easy they come out with Brembos. That bottom one just had a lot of corrosion on it. So now that we've got that out, we should be able to move that ring, and now you just got to push around a little bit and it'll retract the pistons, and we should be able to slide these brake pads out. It's not too crazy. Do not, whatever you do, use any metal products in here if you're planning on keeping your rotor. If you aren't keeping the rotor, feel free to put something in between here, but never against the piston itself other than a brake pad or a squeezing tool, because if you do and it slips or it's a smaller area of surface area, it could crack the piston and then you're off to get new calipers. After you've moved it around a little bit, look at that, we are sliding out. Again, we will loosen these off, and I don't care if these get marked up a little bit because these guys are not going back in. After you get it out to here, wiggle, and huzzah, first brake pad out. As you can see, that one was getting pretty thin. We had a little bit of meat on there, but it was getting thin. Next, do the same, but with this side. Again, just rotate, and look at that. Pressure off of it. Away she goes. Perfect. We can now technically retract these pistons. Now, I'll teach you a trick. You can use these as leverage. If we have enough room in here, you can do this. And if you do that, depending, it might actually retract for us. Just like that. Again, I've done this for Brembo brakes as well. See, it just moves the piston and goes from there. Now, what some people will also do is they'll crack the bleeder loose, and then they'll leak some of the brake fluid out, and then they'll bleed it when they go to do it afterwards, meaning this little bleeder right here, they'll open it up, let it squirt out a little bit, and then it'll relieve the pressure inside the brakes, and you can do it that way if you so wish. I usually just compress them like I just showed you, slide the new pad in, move this over, do the next. Now, unfortunately, you can skip to the next part. If you're not going to do this, I'm going to be loosening this off, and I'm swapping out this rotor. As you can see, it's already loose. All we got to do is pull off the whole brake caliper right here with 2 bolts, move it off to the side, swap on our new rotor, and you'll see that in 1 second. So the bolts we're going to take out are the 2 big 17s right here. One there and one there. How you know it's the right one? It's the one that's connected to our control arm area right here that comes up to the knuckle, which holds your wheel bearing. So, like I said, don't take out the ones closest to you on this side and this side of the caliper. These 2 right here, this one and this one right where my fingers are, do not take out. Just the big 17s in the rear. I've got the bolts nice and loose on this one. All you're gonna do now is come up here, loosen this bracket. It should be a 12. And if we take this off, then we'll be on these flexi lines, which will allow you to move the caliper out of the way. Probably easier to show you the bolts now, because these 2 big guys, not the guys in the rear, as you can see. So once you have these 2 big guys off, now we're free. I put this on the jack so that way it's not hanging on the lines. You don't want to do that, especially with a hard line. It'll unbend the hard line, and you don't want it to accidentally kink or anything like that. If you're wondering why it's wet, it's because we shot penetration fluid earlier. Anyways, see how this is loose? We can go ahead, take this rotor off now, and slide the new one on. So if you pull those 2 bolts off and you're switching your rotors, which chances are if yours are as old as that, it's really easy. Take both those brake pads you took out, put 2 C-clamps, C-clamp them. It's not going to be hard. Just tie in the 2 C-clamps. It's going to push the pads back on the pistons. Fluid goes back into the reservoir. After you've done that, pull the 2 clamps off, slide it on. We'll put in those 2 17s again. We'll also be using a little bit of blue Loctite. This will make sure those bolts don't back off, and I'll give you the torque spec in 1 moment. So again, just lubricate with a little bit of Loctite, and that way it also holds the thread. You can also use it on this bolt, not as much because it's not really structural. If for some reason that backed off, there's less chance of it falling out. That's that little bolt right there that holds the bracket. But just make sure you throw a little bit on here, especially if you do off-roading. Last thing you want is a caliper to loosen off while you're in the bush. All right, so those 2 17s now, if you have a torque wrench, go ahead and crank those things down to 96 foot-pounds. Again, that's a lot, but if you throw a little bit of Loctite on there, even if you get closer to 90, you're doing awesome. Again, blue Loctite, never red. red, and next time you're gonna cry. If you already got them, but again, just make sure that you have yours. If yours doesn't say on and off, it's up to tighten off the driver's side. So on the passenger side, it'll probably be down to tighten. Just something to note when tightening those back up. Since we've compressed both of the, or all four of them, as I should say, they're 4-piston, which is insane. It's awesome, but also insane. Well, now we'll go ahead, we'll slide in our brake pads. Take this, take a little bit of this, and just wipe the back of the pad. You're probably wondering, well, why? It'll help it from sticking to the piston during braking. You don't have to do this part. It's just something I've always done with brake pads. Whatever you do, put it on the back of the pad and never put it, like I said, on the front. You never want to get it on the front. You get it on your gloves. Take your gloves off because you don't want to get it on the brake surface. It'll lubricate it and you might not tell me the story. So if you want, soak the pin a little bit in the brake clean. Go ahead and scrape it with a Scotch-Brite. What this is going to do is be minorly abrasive and clean some of the rust off. You'll probably notice the pin slips in a lot easier than it came out. Last but not least, silicone ceramic lubricant, once again, that we use on the back of the pads. Go ahead and just lubricate the pin, and that way you can slide it in just that much easier. Now that we got our lubricated pins like so, let's grab some of our new hardware. You're just going to go ahead and grab one of these new guys, and it should fit like so. It should expand outward away from the rotor. So again, like that. That one goes in the hole right there. In sec. Ooh, let's see there. See, just like that. This goes down, and when we put the pin in, it'll now go through both hoops. I'm gonna say both hoops. How Canadian of me. Anyways, just like that. Now we'll go ahead. We'll do the same to the next one, which is this guy right here. All we do, once again, make sure it folds upward. This one goes there by squishing it. There, come on. That one in? Yep, that one's in. Slide it in just like so. So again, just like we did there, we're gonna do it down here. Just make sure you're in the 2 holes there. This should go down to the pad. It should not be making any connection to the rotor. This is extremely important. If it touches the rotor, it's just gonna wear right out. So from there, just slide this back through, just like that. And if you want, you can give them a couple love taps with the hammer. Just make sure you're actually in on the other side. Once we've done that, take your new cotter pins and slide them through the hole that's on the back side of the pin. So again, just like we did there, we're going to do it down here. Just make sure you're in the 2 holes there. This should go down to the pad. It should not be making any connection to the rotor. This is extremely important. If it touches the rotor, it's just going to wear right out. So from there, just slide this back through, just like that. And if you want, you can give them a couple love taps with the hammer. Just make sure you're actually in on the other side. Once we've done that, take your new cotter pins and slide them through the hole that's on the back side of the pin. So let's go over everything. Pins through. Our brackets are on either side right here, and it comes across right here. This is through the hole. This is through the hole for cotter pins. Again, you just slip it back through the hole. Now, what some people will do, you don't have to do this, but some people that are very scared about these things backing off will take the end that goes through the pin and they'll bend it around the pin so there's no way of it backing off. I might do that, just give it a slight bend. You don't have to, but if you do that, it's best practice to make sure that cotter pin doesn't let go, because if that cotter pin lets go, then your pin could slide out and your pads will start to work their way out. So go to whatever level of safety you want to. From there, we're going to throw a little bit of Loctite and we're going to slap this one back on. I would put that small little bolt at maybe 15 foot-pounds and call it a day. Admire your handiwork. The first one will take you a little while. Once you go to the next side, you're going to be a pro. Again, 15 foot-pounds and 96 on the 2 big bolts at the very back. Pins, well, there's nothing. If you were just doing brake pads, it's not that bad, but to tell you the truth, if you have the tools to do so, pull out those 217s and compress the pads like I showed you. Literally, you can buy 2 C-clamps for like what, 10 bucks, and then you don't have to mess with the pads, do a whole bunch of things. And again, you are driving a bigger vehicle. If you notice any like vibration in the steering, there's usually 2 things that is. One is an unbalanced rim, or second is a warped rotor. If it's a warped rotor, it's a great time to do your rotors. Other than that, go ahead, slide your tire back on, and you're probably, if you're doing this with a wrench, it's only gonna go in like a certain amount, and then the tire is gonna start to turn. So like I said, what I usually like to do is put my tire on, cinch all the bolts up until it tries to spin, and then drop it. But for me, since I have an impact, all I'm gonna do is do it up in a star pattern, put it down on the ground, and then you can go to 100 foot-pounds once it's on the ground on each of the lugs. And remember, tighten in a star pattern, just like my fingers going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, repeat pattern. So again, just right there, right there, right there. And that's all I usually do. And again, this one is actually made to do this. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna crank this up, take it off the jack stand, put it down, and go ahead and just crank her down to 100 foot-pounds with your torque wrench. That's the best way to go. And that is how you complete the front brake job on this Toyota FJ 2007. I'm gonna go ahead now and jump onto the rears. I'm gonna put that on a separate video, and the reason why is that way if you're doing your fronts, you can do the fronts, and if you're doing the rears, and you're doing the rears. Press a like if it helped you out, subscribe for more. I will have a link in the description to how to do the rears, so go ahead, open up the description, click on it, and it'll take you right there.